Hi guys, my name is Emmy, aka Hammerharpy, and welcome back to my channel. If you guys are new here, I am a beginner YouTuber from Melbourne, Australia, and I mostly make content about my rescue pets. In this video, I wanted to touch on a few things that I think people should know before they welcome a bird into their home. So yeah, stay tuned and enjoy the video. This video by saying that I am in no way a bird expert. I do have 3 rescue birds myself. I do work at a pet supply store and I do volunteer at a bird rescue. However, I'm not an expert. I am learning new things every single day. So take everything I'm saying here with a grain of salt and definitely consult with an avian veterinarian about any concerns that you have with your bird. So yeah, let's get into it. Here are some things that you should know before you get a bird. Number 1, they're very messy. If you are sensitive to mess in any way, you don't like cleaning, don't get a bird. They make so much mess. The way they eat, they're messy. So most of the time with most species of birds, they will use their beak to push food that they don't like as much out of the way to get to their favourite bits. So all of my birds, I have 2 parrots. I've got Griffin the Cockatiel, I've got Siren the Indian ringneck, and I have Iris who is a pigeon. All of them push their food out of their bowls while they're eating. They're very messy eaters. Secondly, they poo a lot. So this is one thing that's not really discussed, and it was something that actually surprised me a lot when I got Griffin, was just how much he poos. So smaller birds will generally poo more frequently because they have faster metabolisms. They need to be light in order to fly around, so they basically do a poo, Griffin, maybe every 10 minutes or so. They don't do a wee. Their poo and wee is like in one, and they do it quite frequently. Larger birds won't poo as often, maybe every half an hour or so, but smaller birds, cockatiels, budgies and so on, they poo every 5, 10, 15 minutes. Some birds you can get little bird diapers for. Griffy. So Griffin has what's called a flight suit. This one is from Avian Fashions. It's essentially a bird diaper. So while he's flying around the house, he wears that. It doesn't bother him in any way, and that just has a little pouch, so the poos will drop away from his vent, so it's not touching him. And yeah, that just connects his poo. My pigeon, Iris, also has a diaper as well. They're called Pigeon pants, and that collects her poop as well. Actually, I've just found out that Iris is a boy, but I am in the habit of calling him a her, so I've got to correct myself. Also, Siren, my Indian ringneck, she will not wear a diaper. Most birds probably won't enjoy it. So you never want to force your bird to do something they don't like. Griffin doesn't care. Iris, my pigeon, doesn't care. But Siren does not like it. So she just poos on her perch. She might poo on the ground every so often. I just use a wet wipe to clean it up or mop it up or so on. So yeah, if you're sensitive to mess, don't get a bird. So point number 2, this kind of ties on to them being messy. But this is more focused on parrots, but they can be very destructive. So parrots, they have a really powerful beak. They love to chew. This goes for all parrots, including budgies, including cockatiels. They will chew up your belongings. So you do have to really keep an eye on them and make sure that they have their own toys and their own enrichment that will keep them busy to keep that beak working, because you know, my birds, they've chewed through cords, they pull the keys off my laptop, I've had them chew the bottom of my bathroom door. You really have to watch them. And that goes hand in hand with them being messy, so that they will chew things up and leave mess everywhere. So my birds love chewing up like cardboard and paper and, wood and things like that. So yeah, this is more focused on parrots. Pigeons and finches and canaries, they tend to not be as destructive because they do have that straight beak, but parrots with that hooked beak, they do really like to chew things up. So that's something else to keep in mind as well. You really have to supervise your bird when they're out because they can get into trouble and they do like to make a mess and they do like to destroy your things. In fact, I think they love it. They love to stress me out with that, but they have fun. So number 3 is their lifespan. So something to take into consideration is the species of bird you want to get and how long they're going to live for. So even little birds like budgies and cockatiels, they can live into their 20s or 30s. So it's something you have to consider. Are you ready for that long-term commitment? You're going to have your bird longer than your dog, longer than your cat. Cockatoos, they can live into their 80s, some of them even up to be 100 plus years old. So that's something that you really have to consider. What's going to happen when you're older? What's going to happen if you're in school? What's going to happen when you finish school? What's going to happen when you move out of your parents' house? Birds, they're very sensitive animals, they're very intelligent animals, and they really bond to their owners or their families. So it's really sad that most birds do go through 2 to 3 homes in their lifetime, because people don't realize how much work goes into them, and a lot of people don't realize how long they live for as well. So it's something that you definitely want to keep in mind. Research the kind of bird that you want to get, research how long they live, and just be prepared for a really long-term commitment. So the next point I want to touch on is vet care. So most people don't realize that most vets will not see birds. You cannot really take your bird to see a regular dog or cat vet. You really need to find a vet that specializes in avian species. Just something else to keep in mind, birds do need regular checkups. A lot of people, think that they get a budgie, and it's normal for them just to live 5 years or so, and if it dies, that's just how long they live. No, there would have been something wrong with it and you should have taken it to the vet. People just seem to think that, especially with small birds, because they tend to be cheaper to get, they just think, oh no, I'm not going to take my bird to the vet. It only cost me $20. So yeah, that's something to really consider as well before you get a bird, that they do need specialist vets. They can be expensive. They do need regular checkups. They also tend to hide their illnesses as well because they are a prey species. So something to keep in mind as well is that you really have to keep an eye on them too. If you do start seeing them displaying any symptoms of sneezing or showing any sign of illness, that usually means that the illness is advanced. They tend to hide when they first start getting sick. So yeah, definitely make sure that you have a good vet nearby. Make sure that you have the money put aside. A lot of vets do payment plans as well now, which is awesome. So just be prepared that you will have to spend money going to a vet every so often, whether it's every 1 to 2 years for a checkup. And if there's any sort of illness, definitely take your bird to a vet. I cannot stress this enough. Don't, call a pet store asking for help. Call an avian vet and make an appointment with them, because it could be a life or death situation with birds because they are so sensitive. So the next point I want to touch on ties back into what I was just saying about birds being sensitive. It is their respiratory systems. So birds have extremely, extremely sensitive respiratory systems. You have to be really careful about using certain products around them because that can really disrupt their respiratory system and in some cases kill them. So the biggest thing to be careful of is probably non-stick cookware. So certain pots and pans, they will have this coating on it. It's a non-stick coating. Some of it is called Teflon. They go by a few different names. When they're cooking and when it overheats, it releases a really toxic fume into the air that can kill birds instantly. So you want to be really careful about that. I personally use stainless steel and ceramic cookware because that is safer. It doesn't produce those fumes. Another thing to be careful of is in ovens. There is a self-cleaning setting that when that's put on, that can actually kill birds as well. You've also got to consider what kind of products do you use in your home. Do you use aerosols? Because if you want to get a bird, you'd have to stop using that. Perfumes, candles or scented candles, incense, air fresheners. You cannot use these around birds. It can really make them sick. It can give them an upper respiratory infection, and in some cases it can actually kill them. I personally had to stop using perfume. I used to wear perfume every day. When I got my first bird, Griffin, I stopped using it, and now I only use it on special occasions when I'm leaving the house. So you want to really research what products are safe to use around birds. I personally use F10 veterinary disinfectant around the birds because that is safe to use around animals. You also can use vinegar mixed with water to clean your house. You can use baking soda. You can get unscented cleaning products that are safe as well. But bleach or other really harsh chemicals, you cannot use them around your bird. I also use a air purifier in my home that really helps remove any toxins from the air. Another thing to consider when getting a bird as well is that they produce a lot of dust. So some species of birds produce what's called feather dust or dander. In some cases it is quite extreme. You can actually be allergic to it as well. So Iris, my pigeon, produces a lot. I have to vacuum around her area every single day. Griffin, my cockatiel, also produces a fair amount. However, Siren, my Indian ringneck that you just saw walking behind us, she doesn't really produce that much. So there are some species that produce more dander than others. There's some that produce none. So that is something that you might want to consider before getting a bird, especially if you have asthma or other allergies, because you can be allergic to them and it can actually really hurt your lungs if you have a lot of birds, or if you have any lung issues. It can actually make you quite sick. So definitely recommend getting an air purifier if you have dusty birds, for yourself but also for your birds, because any chemicals that are in the air, any toxins, that will also filter that out. So it's a win-win situation for both of you. So the next point I want to touch on is noise. Birds tend to be quite noisy. Almost every species of bird on the planet will make noise of some sort. So it's something that you really have to consider. If you are sensitive to noise in any way, a bird is probably not going to be the right pet for you. All birds, all pet birds anyways, will make noise of some sort. Some birds tend to be quieter than others, but it can be just dependent on the individual. In my home, Griffin is probably the noisiest, Griffin, my cockatiel, but he's also not overly loud. So he tends to chirp, he tends to squawk, he sings, he whistles, he talks to himself. He is just a very chatty boy. He can also flock call or scream, and he does that usually when he can't see me. Siren, on the other hand, tends to not be as noisy. She's going through a bit of a hormonal period at the moment because she's molting, so she tends to be screaming a little bit more than normal, but she actually usually doesn't make much noise. However, when she does make noise, it's extremely loud. Kind of why she's called Siren, because it is loud like a siren. So that is something else that you need to consider too. Iris, my pigeon, she tends to make a fair bit of noise as well, but it is a lot softer. So she tends to coo and kind of make hooting noises, but she isn't overly loud. So that's something that you really have to consider as well, especially, do you live in an apartment? I personally live in an apartment, however, my walls are very thick. And my birds tend to not be overly noisy, especially because they are only awake during the day, so they don't make any noise during the night as well. I've lived here 5 years, I've had the birds for 4, and I've never had a complaint about the birds. So, but I might just have thick walls, I might just have good neighbours, so there's something that you have to consider too. Maybe if you had a macaw or a cockatoo living in an apartment is probably not the best idea. So yeah, definitely think about the noise level as well. That you can't really train a bird to not be loud. That is just in their nature. They use their voice to communicate. A lot of the time it is to signal to the other flock members where they are in the wild. So yeah, birds will scream a lot, like repeatedly, if their needs aren't being met. So, if a bird is overly tired, one thing that people don't realize when they get a bird is that they really need a lot of sleep. 10 to 12 hours a day is really, really important that they get that full night's rest. In the wild, when the sun goes down, birds go to sleep. They really need a lot of sleep, especially if your bird is hormonal. You really have to make sure that they're getting 10 to 12 hours sleep a night. So if they're not, they may be screaming a lot more. If birds are bored, they may scream a lot more as well. So you really have to make sure that you're giving them a lot of enrichment. Give them foraging toys, scatter feed them, get a tray that they can fill it with like recycled paper or something that they have to forage for their pellets or seeds. Give them things to shred. Just make sure that they're really enriched and they're getting enough exercise. So if they're having a poor diet as well, that can cause behavioural issues too. So it's just like a dog that barks repeatedly, it's usually from boredom. It's the same with birds as well. So you really have to make sure that their needs are being met. However, birds still make noise. You can't, stop them from making noise. It's just something that they do. So yeah, keep that in mind as well. I don't even know what number points I'm on now because I haven't been counting, but the next one is biting. There's a saying that I've heard in the bird community, it's not a matter of if you'll get bit, it's a matter of when. Birds, especially hormonal birds, will bite. I think all of my birds bite me, not overly regularly, but they do. Iris, my pigeon, he loves chasing my feet and pecking at my feet if I get too close to his cage, which he considers his nest. So he can be a little bit territorial over his nest. However, pigeon bites really don't hurt. It's more of like a peck. So yeah, if you are scared of getting bit, maybe consider getting a bird like a finch, a canary, a pigeon or a dove, a bird that doesn't have that hooked, powerful beak, because when they bite, it's more of a peck rather than like a vicious bite like what parrots do. Griffin, my cockatiel, he does bite me on occasion, but it's not overly hard. It's more of like a little warning bite. Like, you know, if he's maybe doing something that's a little bit naughty and I come to pick him up, he may give me a little nip being like, hey, I don't want to stop doing this. I'm having fun. But it doesn't overly hurt. However, when I did first adopt him, he did draw blood on me a couple of times because he was scared. So generally birds will bite because they're scared, because they're aggressive due to hormones, or sometimes it's just telling you off for something. They can be very jealous as well. The bird that bites me the least is Siren, my Indian ringneck. However, like what I was saying before with the noise, when she does it, it's the loudest. When she bites me, it's the hardest. So she only really bites me when she's going through her hormonal phase, which she's actually going through right now, which is kind of why she's making a bit of noise, which she normally wouldn't do. So she's molting at the moment, and that tends to make her a little bit cranky. So she has been biting me a little bit lately. I understand that it's not anything that I'm doing wrong. It's just that she's a little bit hormonal, she's a little bit frustrated. So I'm just making sure that she's having 12 hours of sleep a night, she's getting fed a good diet. You really make sure that they're not getting a lot of sugary food, so I try to avoid feeding any fruit during this period. But yes, sleep is really important, giving them enrichment is really important, and making sure they're getting fed a really good diet, and generally that will reduce the amount that you will be bit. However, I think almost every bird will bite at some point in their life. They may only bite you once every 3-4 years. They might bite you every day. I think that's just something that people, you know, don't think about. It's not really like a dog that you can train out of. You can to a degree, but parrots in particular, they're not domestic animals. They're not an animal that has been domesticated for thousands of years. They are only a few generations from the wild. So that's something to consider as well. You know, they may bite you. So if you're scared of being bitten, it's probably not a good idea to get a bird. Especially some of the larger species, the birds that I have are generally quite small. But cockatoos, macaws, it can be quite severe. Amazons are really known for being quite hormonal birds as well, and they can give really nasty bites. And also not to punish the bird, because most of the time it's not their fault. It's due to hormones, it's due to boredom. So yeah, just really try to be understanding. They are really sensitive creatures, and most of the time they don't mean it. A lot of the time they'll bite and you can tell they kind of feel bad because they try to snuggle up to you afterwards. I personally don't think that most species of birds are good pets for children because of this. Maybe, you know, if you had a budgie or something smaller that wasn't capable of giving a really powerful bite. However, birds are a lot of responsibility. They're a lot of work. They shouldn't be a child's whole responsibility. I think it's okay to have a bird if you had a family and, you know, the parents really involved in looking after the bird, but getting a bird for a kid is not a good idea. They don't have the capability to look after a bird full time. They don't have the capability to pay for a bird to go to a vet. They might not have the capability to keep on top of their cleaning, keep on top of making sure they're getting fresh food, which I'll touch on in a minute as well. So the next point I really want to touch on is diet. So this is something that I think there's a lot of misinformation about out there on what to feed a bird. One thing you have to consider is what species of bird do you have? a parrot or a lorikeet's diet is going to be vastly different to a finch or a pigeon. So it's something that you really have to research, and I really strongly recommend you discuss this with your avian veterinarian because there is a lot of misinformation out there online. A common misconception with most species of birds is that they can survive on seed alone, which is just not true. Most birds need a really varied diet. In particular, I'll talk about parrots because I think that's probably the group of birds that have the most misinformation out there. There is a lot of misconceptions that parrots just need seed and that's all they need to eat, but it is really, really important that you are feeding a variety of fresh foods as well. So I personally feed my parrots, that's Griffin, my cockatiel, and Siren, my Indian ringneck. I feed them pellets, but I also feed them chop. And what chop is, it's a variety of vegetables, grain, there's a small amount of different seeds in there as well. You can put sprouts in there, very small amount of fruit, and it's really important that you're giving them that so they get that variety. So they do still get a small amount of seeds mixed into their chop, however it is only a part of their diet. You really have to make sure you're giving them a variety. So really research the species of bird that you have. Do they need grit in their diet? You know, Iris, my pigeon, really needs grit in her diet because it helps with their digestion. So you really, really have to research what to feed your bird and make sure you discuss it with your avian vet. Also Google what foods are safe for your birds. This is really, really important. Some foods can be really, really toxic. Some that you might not know about is avocado. Avocado is super toxic to birds. There's obvious things like chocolate, alcohol, caffeine, but there's also things like tomato leaves and things that you might not know about. So definitely really research that. Get a list of things that is safe for your bird, write it all down or print it off, stick it on your fridge. I've personally got magnets on my fridge up there that list all, well not all, but a lot of safe fruit and veggies. So I just really make sure I'm checking over that before I'm buying things for them. Feed them a variety of grains and things as well. Mine really like oats. Quinoa they love. I cook that up for them and chop their veggies up. A food processor is really good for this, especially for really picky birds. You want to make sure it's chopped up really, really small and mix their seeds through because generally they, will go through it to get their seed, but while they're getting their seeds out, they will start to swallow their chop as well, and eventually they will start eating it. So some birds can be really fussy if all they've eaten is seed their whole life, but it's really important that they're getting a good variety. Some things that people don't know is that seeds are really high in fat, so that's why you don't want to feed your birds just seed. In particular, sunflower seeds are the fattiest seeds that they can have. Some birds are really, really prone to obesity or fatty lumps, in particular galahs. So if you have a galah, make sure that you are giving them a really, really good variety of foods and not giving them just a seed diet because they are really, really prone to getting fatty lumps. Diet's really important just for not only for your bird's overall physical health, but their mental health as well. Generally, birds that are fed an incorrect diet tend to have more mental problems as well, which may include plucking their feathers out. It may include, excessive screaming. Also making sure, as I discussed earlier, making sure they have enough sleep. So really, it is important that you research what to feed your birds and make sure that you aren't just feeding them, the one type of food because they really need a variety in their diet. And yeah, so definitely look for a good avian vet, take your bird for a checkup and discuss with them the appropriate diet for your bird. It's really, really important. So the next thing I want to discuss is probably one of the most important things about having a bird is enrichment. Birds are really intelligent. Even birds that you may not think that are intelligent, such as pigeons, they are actually super, super smart and they tend to get bored easy. So you really have to make sure that you're giving your birds things to do. One thing that I really think is a great thing to do for your birds is to scatter feed them or forage feed them. So what that means is you can get a tray, fill it with recycled cat litter or recycled paper or some other kind of substrate and put their pellets or seeds in there that they have to forage through. Another thing is getting them puzzle toys. Siren had it's actually a dog puzzle that I put her pellets in and I also put a small amount of seeds in there and she has to work through it to get her food out. And that just keeps her mind really busy. Giving your parrots things to chew up. They love chewing things up. Wood. Some birds really like bells, things that make a noise. Mirrors can be quite controversial generally. I wouldn't recommend giving your bird a mirror, particularly if it's a aggressive bird or hormonal or has any kind of behavioural issues. Really avoid giving your bird a mirror. However, a lot of people will say it's okay to give pigeons a mirror. So it really depends on the species as well. Pigeons are so intelligent that they can actually recognize themselves in the mirror. So only very, very few animals can do this. I think apes, humans obviously, and pigeons can actually do this, whereas parrots actually don't recognize that it's themselves. Even though they are super intelligent, they don't have that self-awareness in a mirror. Also, research what toys are safe for your bird. So there are a lot of unsafe materials. The biggest one that I see issues with is toys with cotton rope or toys with cotton, and because they can cause impaction. So what happens is with birds that tend to chew, like parrots, some toys will have these cotton ropes on it that they will chew, and some birds will swallow it, and that will cause them a crop impaction. So parrots or most birds will have what's called a crop. It is like a pouch in their neck that they kind of store food before it goes down into their stomach. So that can become impacted, or they can get impactions in their stomach from the fibres not being able to pass through them. So I would definitely recommend you not give your birds any cotton rope toys, or if you do, make sure that if you see them chewing it, take it out immediately. So some birds like finches and things like that, canaries, pigeons, they are okay with having cotton toys. Iris, my pigeon, has a few like cotton teddies and things that she likes to snuggle up with. She has a little like dog bed that she sleeps in because they don't chew. But with parrots in particular, you've got to be really careful with that. Some people will use rope perches because they're actually quite good for their feet. However, if your bird starts to chew these, you have to take it out immediately because it can actually kill them. So be really, really careful with cotton things. Another thing I want to touch on is those like cotton huts. I think they're called happy huts. They can be really, really dangerous as well. There's heaps and heaps of stories out there. If you go talk to any avian vet or any avian vet nurse, and they'll tell you get rid of it straight away because they can swallow it. It can also cause a lot of hormonal issues. So birds generally will sleep in, a lot of birds will sleep in like hollows in the wild, and that's where they'll make their nest. But if your bird has any hormonal issues, I would definitely not give them any sort of nesting box. That is also going to encourage breeding. So if you are not wanting your bird to breed and you're not wanting your bird to have any hormonal issues, or you're not wanting your bird, if it's a female, to lay infertile eggs if it's on its own, definitely take out any kind of nest box. They don't need a nest box to sleep. Obviously this is different if you are maybe breeding birds. You would obviously give them a nest box, but I wouldn't breed birds. I'm personally an adoption advocate. However, if you do choose to breed birds, only do so if you are super, super knowledgeable and you're prepared to really research them, their care and everything. Please don't just breed your birds because you feel like they want to. Like, all animals want to breed. It doesn't mean that it's right to just let them breed when we have so many, in shelters needing homes. So just really think about it before you do want to breed, and if you do, make sure that you're super knowledgeable about it and you have some guidance from experienced people to help you. This video is becoming quite long, so apologies in advance. Another thing I really want to touch on is safety with having a bird. So I briefly spoke about household dangers with their respiratory system, but there are a few other things in and outdoors of the house that can really hurt them. So I want to just quickly touch on those. So number one, do you have any other pets? Do you have a dog or a cat? This is a really, really important one. Dog and cat saliva is really toxic to birds, so you really don't want to let them interact in any way. Most obvious thing is their predatory instinct. So if you do have birds, I would strongly, strongly advise that you keep them separate. That doesn't mean locking your bird in a room where it's going to be by itself, Birds are flock animals, just like dogs are pack animals. They really, really need company. If they are going to be in a separate room, please have more than one. So make sure that you're having a couple of birds so they have each other to be with. But yeah, if you do have other pets in the house, just be really, really careful. There are so many horror stories about, people's dogs or cats killing their birds. I really, really don't recommend letting them interact in any way. Just no matter how good your dog is, no matter how good your cat is, because you never know. Even if the dog or cat licks the bird, they can actually get really sick from it as well. So the dog or cat might not actually be, displaying predatory behaviors. It may just want to lick them and sniff them and get close to them, but even that can be really bad for them as well. So definitely keep that in mind. Other things to consider are like fans. If you have, ceiling fans or any kind of fans in the house, if they fly into it, that's going to really injure them or potentially kill them. Birds can be quite small sometimes, so, and mine like to walk around on the floor and things like that, so you have to be really careful that you're not going to step on them or accidentally kick them. The toilet seat, I always keep my toilet seat down because if they fall in it, they can drown, or, keep your bathroom doors closed. Another really big one is when you're traveling with your bird, make sure your travel cage is really, really secure. So what I do is I actually zip tie it all together as well, and I'll usually peg or zip tie the door closed as well, because it happens quite a lot that people will be transporting their bird and they'll either drop their travel cage or it will fall apart, and then the bird can escape. And when a bird that's lived indoors its whole life, or a bird that's lived in captivity its whole life, when they do, escape, which happens quite a lot, most of the time they will not survive. It is really, really sad. That's obviously a big thing to say, which I think this is general knowledge, but I think some people need to hear this. If you don't want your bird anymore, whatever you do not just let it go. You are sentencing your bird to death. So please, please, if you cannot care for your bird anymore, surrender it to a rescue. It's really, really important. Obviously, we don't really like to see birds in captivity. We wish that they could all be free in the wild. However, the reality of it is that these birds are bred in captivity, and these birds cannot survive in the wild, so you cannot just release them. Siren, my Indian ringneck, she was actually found as a stray before she went into the rescue, and she, was missing a toe, she was really underweight, so it's something that you really have to be careful of. Making sure that you're keeping your doors closed, your windows closed, because if your bird does escape, it's really hard to get them back, and if you do get them back, you're very, very lucky. Another thing I want to touch on as well is microchipping your bird. A lot of people don't know that you can microchip your bird. It's super, super important. Leg bands are not really a form of identification. You can get some, you can get custom ones with your phone number and things like that. I actually have one of those for Iris, my pigeon. However, leg bands can actually be quite risky, in particular with parrots, because parrots tend to climb a lot. They can actually get stuck on things, and that can, break their leg and things like that. So with parrots, or, birds that tend to be climbing around the place, I probably wouldn't use a leg band. I would look into getting your birds microchipped. Siren is microchipped. Griffin is not microchipped, however, I am planning on getting him microchipped. But any birds smaller than a cockatiel, you generally cannot microchip. Budgies, canaries, finches. But birds sort of cockatiel size and up, you can actually get microchipped. And they actually put it in the breast area of the bird, not on the back like they would a dog or a cat. So a lot of people actually don't know that you can microchip your bird. So if you're just learning this for the first time, look into it, because it is really important. If your bird ever does get lost and handed into a vet, they can scan your bird and track you down and reunite you with your bird, because a lot of people try to claim birds that aren't theirs. It's a really big thing online, and volunteering with the rescue, I hear about it a lot as well, where people will claim this bird is theirs, but it's actually not. They can't, in some cases, the bird will be at the rescue and it will have really distinctive features such as missing a foot. And, they'll ask, is there anything special about your bird? And they'll be like, no, or, they'll say something else. So yeah, just be really, really careful. Get your bird microchipped if you can. another big thing as well is if your bird has clipped wings. I don't really want to go into wing clipping too much because it is a quite controversial topic. I personally don't really like wing clipping, especially long term, because I think it can cause a few issues mentally and also physically. Your birds can get, overweight. They can get like muscle atrophy and things like that from not being able to exercise. But if you do clip your bird's wings, don't take your bird outside with clipped wings. They can still fly. So a lot of the birds that come into the rescue are clipped because people don't realise that, if it's a windy day, if the bird gets fright and gets an adrenaline rush, they can actually still fly. So it's really, really, really important. If you do want to take your bird outside, harness train your bird. You can get really, really awesome harnesses. There's ones called the aviator harness that my birds have that I've trained them to go outside with, which is much safer for them. Or you can get them like little backpacks. There's something called like the packer bird, and they can sit in the backpack. It's all mesh in the back. You can get quite big ones, and they can go, on walks with you that way. Or you can get them, like I've seen people have like little prams and stuff, which I think is really cute. Or you can take them out in travel cages, just make sure they're really secure. But if for whatever reason you do have your bird's wings clipped, do not take it outside unless it's got a harness on. It's really important because they can actually still fly. They may not be able to fly well, but birds with clipped wings generally can fly. Obviously it's a different story if your bird is like disabled or whatever and it can't fly. That's totally different. But if your bird just has clipped wings, they usually can still fly. So just keep that in mind as well, because there are a lot of birds coming into the rescue that I volunteer at that do have clipped wings that are still flying around outside. So just be really, really careful, okay? I kind of think I've rambled enough now. I've gone over pretty much everything that I wanted to discuss in this video. There are heaps of videos like this online, so definitely, check those out too, and research as much as you can before you want to get a bird, because they are a lot of work. They're messy, they're loud, they have special needs, they need special diets. I'm going to leave some links in the description. I'm going to leave one for the rescue I volunteer with, which is Kiwi's New Life Bird Rescue. They have some really good articles on their website about some of the things that we discussed today, including safety. They also have some good information on what to feed your birds. They have like chop recipes. I'll also leave a link in case you want to donate to them, because they do such amazing, amazing work for birds. I adopted Siren from them. They literally have over 100 birds at their rescue needing homes. So if you do live in Melbourne and you are thinking about adopting a bird, definitely check out Kiwi's New Life Bird Rescue, or consider volunteering with them one day, because they do often need help with cleaning and playing with the birds and making toys and things like that. So if you're interested in volunteering at a rescue, that's actually a really good way to learn about birds before you get a bird. So I'd highly recommend you volunteer. You can also foster, so look into fostering a bird before you adopt one. But yeah, if you do want to get a bird, definitely research as much as you can. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it wasn't too long. I hope it wasn't too boring. I know it was just really me talking the whole time. I didn't really have much footage of the birds because they're all kind of doing their own thing today. Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. I'll really, really appreciate it. If you have anything you want to add to anyone that you think is thinking about getting a bird, leave a comment about things that they can look into as well. I'm sure I've missed things, so definitely leave a comment. And yeah, thank you so much, guys, and see you next time. Bye! Say bye, everyone. Bye.